Hey, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you. I know most of you. For those that I have not met, my name's Enney. As Randall was saying, my background here, my illustrious 1.5 years being involved in politics really focused on education, and that's because I felt long ago that the public education system in particular in the country is broken. No nice way to put it. Looking here at Paso Robles, the class of 2023, which will walk in May, they're going to have a 94% graduation rate. Only 25% of those students will meet state standards for mathematics. Only 50% of those students will meet reading and English standards. So we have a system that just basically pushes people through. And to call them graduates, I challenge. I question that. My background in the Marine Corps, you either met standards or you didn't meet standards. If you didn't meet standards, you weren't a graduate. You can get a participation certificate or something like that, maybe, but we have to fix it because this is the future. And right now, I can't say it's looking good. I think most of the families who could afford it have probably moved their kids out of the Paso Robles School District. You had a mass exodus during COVID. About 300 students left the school district between 2020 and 2022. So many left that they were looking at closing one of the campuses. If you compare that to the private schools in the county, every private school has a wait list. And so if you just look at it from a business perspective, as a school district, you're not doing something to attract people. And when you look at either the district trustees on down, nobody seems to want to address that. There's definitely, in my opinion, a mindset of sort of to go along to get along. And when you looked at the conservative side of that board of trustees, in many ways they were kind of blocked from seeing what was going on. There was a lot of stuff. And I only made 3 meetings before they kicked me off. But
you were fast.
I exceeded my own expectations on that one. So you got to play to your strengths. But it was apparent to me that there was a lot of I'll just flat out call it collusion going on between the more liberal members, progressive members of the trustees and the superintendent and the staff there. That first meeting, to give you a quick rundown of how I met my not so ceremonial end. That first meeting at the district was on the 10th of October, and Moms for Liberty had a lady that came in who presented to the board about the Trevor Project. If you go into, you can do it tonight if you are so inclined, but you go into the Paso Robles district page, you go under student services, and there's a drop-down menu off the student services, and there to this day there's a link for LGBTQIA. I still don't know what the IA stands for. But they had a link, when you clicked on that, they had a link to what was known as the Trevor Project. And the Trevor Project is a support group for LGBTQ at-risk youth. And within that link is Trevor Chat, and it's a chat room for 13 to 24-year-olds to discuss sexuality.
Oh, no.
Any problem with that? Well, the school district didn't think there was a problem. The web page, the Trevor Project, was taken down, and my immediate concern, which I voiced to Kurt DeBost, was you have to determine who went into that web page, because that is a predator's playground, and you need to be able to tell parents your child went into there and may have been exposed to a predator. We hear all about cyber sex trafficking and cyber predators. You had the murder in Riverside County a couple weeks ago which was the result of catfishing, which is somebody masquerading as somebody they're not. And so I take these kind of things seriously based off of my previous career. Didn't get the same sort of enthusiasm or concern from either DeBost or any of the staff, and we had to continue to push it. And it got to the point where I said, if you're not going to do anything, and this was probably within 72 hours, and this is when I sealed my fate. I said, if you're not going to do anything, then we need to contact Dan Dow. And you either you get law enforcement involved, and law enforcement can do a child endangerment investigation. I know Paso PD can do computer forensics and basically go through it. Well, we don't have access, we changed service providers. Well, if it's a law enforcement issue, they can still get a warrant and go talk to the service provider. Didn't do it. I think at that point, when I start connecting the dots, that was probably the shot that caused them to go after me. A little aside, the lady that started the recall petition against me, it was actually her office that hosted that link. And so her name is Carrie Alvord Schaff. She's good friends with Linda Becker.
No, not true.
But it was her office that basically was hosting that link. And I think she probably had a reason why she wanted to see me go at that point. So 2 meetings later, I was gone. Honestly, looking at the culture war issues there, I hate to be pessimistic, but having gone to 10 of the schools in the district, I think the culture wars issue is a losing battle in the high school right now. And that's because in spite of all the policies against CRT and rainbow flags and sexualization, none of the policies are followed or enforced. I think the trustees have basically they've passed the policies, but they've trusted the superintendent and the staffs and the principals to enforce those policies. And there is no enforcement. And the way the trustees find out that it's not being enforced is when a teacher comes to Frank Triggs and hands Frank Triggs a copy of an email talking about, hey, social justice training at Cal Poly starting next week. And that was sent out by the principal of the high school. There's no enforcement mechanism. There's no real ability amongst the 7 trustees to conduct proper oversight, in my opinion. And the way to fix that, if I get back on, and I think a nonpartisan issue that I could push, is you need to have that parental involvement, and the way to do that is having parental oversight committees. Whether it's fiscal issues, which I don't trust the budget people in that office at all, or curriculum issues, you should have nonpartisan parental committees that report to the trustees, not to the staff and the superintendent. That's a check and a balance, which doesn't exist. I don't see any checks and balances in the system at all. We have nobody that reviews the curriculum outside of the staff, and then we're just told that, hey, there's nothing wrong with it. The staff, I think, flat out lied on multiple occasions in the 3 meetings that I was there. And there's no consequence, is the bottom line. And there have to be consequences if you expect to have change. And so having that outside oversight, I think, would help in many regards. Backing up onto the fiscal stuff. So one of the things that struck me that first meeting was you have the primary duty of the board is it's elected by the community to provide leadership and citizen oversight of the district schools. And part of that is the fiscal responsibility. So that first meeting that I sat in, you get about 700 pages to review in 72 hours. And a large section of that material is supposed to be for consent agenda. Basically, Is everybody okay with this? Yes, okay. All in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. And what they do is they stick the purchase orders into that consent agenda. And when you look at the purchase orders, you'll have the name of who's getting the money, and you'll have the amount of money, but you don't have any idea of what the item is being purchased, and you're supposed to approve it at that meeting. And so the first meeting, I called Brad Pulowski because there was a $500 and something thousand purchase. I'm like, hey, what's this? He goes, oh, I'll have to get back to you, I don't know. Well, we're supposed to be approving this at the board meeting. And I had multiple interactions with him over this and finally said, you know what, I know you're new, but it's in the consent agenda. And I said, well, it shouldn't be in the consent agenda in my opinion. It should be in the regular open part of discussion because that's something I think the public would want to know about. But he said, I'll get you the manual and it'll all be clear after that.
Oh, yeah.
And so he sent me an 800-page manual. He said, anytime you have a question, just refer to the 800-page manual. I said, all right, I see how the game's going to be played. So the fiscal issues, you have 7 board members who are at the mercy of the superintendent and his staff who work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and they know exactly the story they're going to sell to those seven board members. And those 7 board members are good-natured, whether they're on the left or the right. They're good-natured citizens that just want to help. And there's a degree of trust there. And that degree of trust, in my opinion, has been abused. And that's why I think, first and foremost, we have to have those checks and balances if we're going to start taking back our schools. And that's probably my biggest lesson learned. As far as fixing the school district, we say we're the district of excellence. Across the board, the math proficiency rate for all the schools is 28.57%. That's the math proficiency rate. Across the state, the average is 39%. Nationwide, it's 49%. So when you start looking at Paso Robles Joint Unified School District, we're already in the bottom 10% performance-wise of the nation. If you start comparing us to the 36 industrialized countries, the United States already ranks 19th in science and 30th in math. So again, just looking at the mathematics, at that point, these students, they're in the bottom 3% of all students graduating in the industrialized nation. But if you talk to the superintendent and the staff, hey, we're good. So getting back on the board, in my opinion, I don't expect to get much done in the year and a half that I would have left on there, except I could establish forced policy changes and set up a framework where there'll be more transparency and there'll be more involvement. Once you have that transparency, that's when you can start forcing the change. Fixing the culture war issues, unfortunately, I think the best way to fix that is you're gonna have to have lawsuits. Lauren McCoy sent a picture. I walked through the high school, and you walk into Bearcat Hall, for those of you that know Paso High, you walk into Bearcat Hall, and they have an American flag, and then they have a rainbow flag with Paso Pride, the Bearcat logo superimposed over it. And I've brought this up to the conservative club, but in June, there was a lawsuit in Boston where a church group sued the city of Boston, because Boston would not let them put the Christian flag up in front of the city hall. The case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and it was a 9-0 decision in favor of the church group that Boston had discriminated against them. I think that's the only way you're going to start forcing change in these schools. Is the kids and the parents have to start suing these people. The trustees can support them from the side. But even if I get back on, and hopefully, we get Joel Peterson out of there, and Hunter Breeze gets in there, we'd be able to turn it then. But in the next couple of months, I suspect what you're going to see is, even if I get back on, they're going to undo a lot of the policies that were passed by the conservative board. You're going to wind up with the pronouns issue being brought back up. They're probably going to allow critical race theory. And That's the bottom line. So what I'm asking for is really for your support and your backing. I'm going to bring leadership and experience. Again, my bottom line up front is the system's broken, and the only way you're going to fix it is basically to hold people accountable and enforce standards. Once you start enforcing standards, which means you got to stop just promoting people. You got to teach them early on that school's serious. If you want to go to the next grade, you got to meet the standards, and that's the only way you're going to improve performance. So,
Thank you.
thank you.